Hi there, if you've been watching my videos lately, you know that I'm currently engaged and almost married. In fact, by the time you're watching this video, I'll be just a couple days away from the wedding. It's very exciting time right now. But one thing that most people do not tell you about when you get engaged is the amount of work involved with wedding planning, and more specifically, no one really teaches you how to plan a wedding. Wedding planning is no joke. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of work on top of your existing life responsibilities. Now, outside of YouTube, I'm a full-time project manager, and I really thought my skills as a project manager would really help me through this wedding planning phase, and to a certain extent it did, but to my surprise, a lot of the things I thought would be easy did not become easy at all. Me and my fiance tried keeping things simple, and no matter how hard we tried, the planning was not going away. There was still so much work to do. Now, in terms of my planning system, the first thing I started on was Google Sheets. I did this because I was already familiar with Google Sheets. I made a whole structured database of tasks, milestones, schedules, everything in a big Google Sheet. And this worked out pretty well, but the problem was a few different things. Updating it was very annoying because things kept changing so quickly that the whole structure of the sheet needed to keep evolving every other week. And then also my fiance was not the most familiar with Google Sheets. It was easy enough to pick up. It's a Google Doc at the end of the day, so that wasn't the biggest deal, but there was still a learning curve there. It was just not the most ideal solution, and it kept changing all the time. Now, after getting frustrated with Google Sheets, the next thing I decided to do was convince my fiance we needed to switch to Notion. And this was a big deal because I was the only one that knew how to use Notion. My fiance was still very supportive. She let me do that, and she agreed to try learning it as well, and we tried it. And to a certain extent, Notion was a great solution. However, there were quite a few problems with this as well. Firstly, using Notion was very confusing for my fiance. If you ever use Notion for the first time, it is very confusing. It takes a long time to learn how to use all the advanced features, and I was already familiar with that, so there's a learning curve there. It just wasn't working in that regard. But secondly, it was getting really annoying to keep track of all my tasks. I was actually spending more time building out the Notion system than actually completing the tasks I had to do. Notion is just a rabbit hole of complexity. You can really dive deep into the things that really waste your time, and that's exactly what I was doing. Notion also had a few other small issues like reliability. It was very slow. I just didn't like using it sometimes, and that was a nail in the coffin right there. What I decided to do after that was switch off of Notion, and that leads me to today. What I want to show you in today's video is a system that me and my fiance used to plan our wedding. This went through many different iterations. There is no right way of planning a wedding, but I do hope this video will help somebody out there who may be in a similar phase of life, and this productivity system of organizing all your data and all your tasks into a clean system. I really hope this system will help some couple out there who are planning their wedding. Let's jump right into it. Now, the first part of the system is probably the easiest thing to set up, but it makes the biggest impact, and that is simply having a shared Google Calendar between you and your partner. And this made such a big difference for us. Google Calendar is very easy to use. I won't jump really into the specifics of that, but one thing I will say that made a big difference for our planning is every single month for the past few months, we decided to start doing a monthly check-in. And this is really great because basically we sat down for the beginning of the month and just planned out every single week of the month. We discussed things like events coming up, birthdays, anniversaries, family events, anything like that that we both had to be aware of. But more importantly, we also planned out our weekends. And this really helped us stay on top of all the different things we wanted to do every single weekend. Me and my fiance were somewhat long distance. We're about an hour and a half apart. So weekends were the only time we got to meet up in person and do things. And that was a great way to make sure we got things done and stay organized and stay focused on the things that we actually had to do. So yeah, tip number one is have a shared calendar. Put all your shared events in that one calendar, but more importantly, simply do a monthly check-in, reviewing the calendar and adding things into it together so you can plan out every weekend, every week ahead. Now, next up, we have Evernote. Now, this was a big transition for us because Notion was not working out and we needed something new to keep track of all these little notes that we were taking. And luckily for my fiance, she had already used Evernote Evernote before, and that worked out really well for me because I had also used it before. So this was an app that we were both familiar with. It's very simple to use, and it just makes life so much easier. There's no complicated system that you have to build. All we really did was make a notebook. We shared it with each other, so we all had the same notes under the same notebook, and we just put every single note that required or involved our wedding into this one notebook. It was very, very convenient. It's very, very simple. Now, there are a few key parts of Evernote that I really like that I want to mention here. Firstly, we were not wasting any time on setting up a hierarchy. With Notion, you get really sucked into databases and creating a page structure, things like that. With Evernote, it's very quick to create a new note. All you have to do is have one notebook and all your notes underneath that. That just made life so much simpler. But also, a key part of Evernote that I think is underrated is the email feature that you can email your confirmation emails into Evernote. So what we do is whenever we booked something or had a contract email to us or any important email, all we have to do is forward that email into our Evernote notebook. I really, really love this because oftentimes I have to go digging through my old emails, finding an email that I got from a vendor. Not anymore. With Evernote, I know that I forward all those emails into my wedding notebook. They're all going to be there. It makes it so much quicker to find things, and they're also shared between me and my fiance, so there's no worry about who got the email. It's all going to be in that notebook no matter what. Now, as much as I love Evernote, it does not do one thing very well, and that is going through large amounts of data in a spreadsheet. We use Google Sheets for things like our guest list and wedding budget. Those two things specifically are very, very important. I'm always going back to the wedding budget to add new expenses, and having Google Sheets allows me to have a formula set up so I can have different categories and see how much we're spending based on category. I can also track things like who's paying for what, if we have to reimburse people in our family, anything like that. I had a very nice Google Sheet set up to allow us to track all of our finances. You can't do things like this in Notion or Evernote, and if you can, you'll be spending way too much time setting them up. Google Sheets is just so much easier with formulas, and it's a shared sheet, so it's not like Excel where you're kind of stuck in your own little world. Google Sheets allows collaboration, which makes it so much easier to go across multiple people. Same thing for our guest list, especially the guest list. We were going through this almost every single day at certain points, multiple times a day. Having a real-time collaboration tool like Google Sheets for large amounts of data with a bunch of names and categories and different events, this was very, very helpful, and it really allowed us to stay on top of our game. Now, lastly, this one tool that I really have to say is my favorite one of all of them is my task manager called Things. Things is an app that I use personally to keep track of all my to-dos. Now, everyone has a different preference when it comes to managing to-do lists. I like using an app like Things. My fiance likes to write things down in a planner. It really depends on your personal preference. And back when I was using Notion and asking my fiance to use it, both of us were trying to use a system that kind of worked for each of us, but it wasn't really our preference. It's really important to know how you prefer to keep track of all your to-do lists, and it's really important that you follow a system that works for you that might not be the same for your partner. So recognizing that and respecting that for each other is a great way to get even more productive while also enjoying what you're doing. So for me, I use Things, and I really love this app because it's a pleasant experience to use. I love technology and I love well-designed apps, and I really appreciate the small details. And I only use this app for task management. It's really important that you don't mix your notes and your tasks together. Again, with Notion, that's kind of what I was doing. All my to-dos and all my notes were all in one place. Having an app dedicated to actionable items like tasks is really, really helpful. I prefer having that separate from my notes. All I did in Things was create one project for the wedding and put every single actionable item for the wedding underneath that project. I also created some subheadings to keep myself organized, but I also had deadlines and other things. This app just makes it so much easier to keep track of every little thing that has to get done, no matter how big or small. As long as I clarified it into the next actionable step, it would end up inside this app. And the beautiful thing about this is because I have so many other things happening besides besides wedding planning, I use this app for my other projects as well. So all my to-dos are all in one place, so I can quickly manage my next day's action items all in one app. I saw a big increase in productivity when I started using Things for all my wedding task management. I was no longer worrying about creating a system to keep track of the tasks. I was actually worrying about getting the tasks done. So to recap the entire system right now, we have a shared Google Calendar for all the events. We do a monthly check-in to update that together. On top of that, we use Evernote for email confirmation, any quick notes that we have to write down. They all end up in a shared Evernote notebook. And then we also use Google Sheets for the things like wedding budget and a guest list. And then lastly, depending on your preference, you could use a task manager like Things or a physical planner to keep track of all your to-dos. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you have an interest in learning more about my task manager, check out my video going really in depth in that. I break it down and show you exactly how I use that app. Link for that on the screen right now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.